Welcome to the Voice of San Antonio podcast. I'm Ellie Morrison, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Director and CEO of the McNay Art Museum, Matthew McLendon. Thank you for having us here in your cultural home.
We are so happy to have you here. It's nice. This is kind of a different view than I usually get of the Sims lobby.
I love this particular room because it's got so much history.
It does. It was the original entrance to Marian Koogler's house. And so, I get stories all the time from our visitors that have been coming to the McNay for, decades upon decades about how they used to come in. The door used to just be open. You could just come in and out as you pleased. A little bit different these days.
Yeah.
But still, when we're having special events at the museum, we try and use this as either the entrance or the exit to the event, because it does just, it kind of, elevates the whole mood of the event.
Well, I always say that I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in
Right.
her time when her doors were open and everybody just kind of came and went.
Absolutely. I think one of the early things that I noticed about the original part of the museum, which was her house, is that it's actually not a very domestic space. There are domestic areas. She had her wing upstairs. Her husband of the time had his wing upstairs. She had her studio. But really, it's a house that was built for entertaining. And so, it is oriented to get these incredible sunsets. You imagine coming in through the front door with this sunset and the door into the patio being opened, and it just would have been an absolutely spectacular kind of arrival. It still is.
Oh, well, it still is. And always and ever magnificent, as she probably very meticulously intended.
Oh, I think this was a huge goat farm, I believe, before they decided to build here. And, she very clearly chose this spot because it's the highest point on the property. And then, of course, it's on the Austin Highway. And when this was built in the 1920s, there would have been nothing. It was a goat farm. There would have been nothing out here. And so, I think we can say there was definitely some ego involved in the selection, because she knew she would both be the first thing you saw coming down the Austin Highway into San Antonio, and you would be the last thing, she would be the last thing that you saw leaving San Antonio. So I think she really did view it as the gateway into the city.
Well, speaking of gateway, this is a cultural gateway, and it remains a cultural gateway for so many members of our community and for up-and-coming artists, and as well as established artists, and then also people like yourself who are now San Antonians.
Yeah, do I get to call myself a San Antonian after only 2 years? I feel like,
you know what?
multiple decades before you can actually say that.
No, not at all. We welcome all new San Antonians. But I would love to hear a bit about your journey and your background for those who don't know, and sort of how you ended up at the McNay. And you're doing such wonderful things to lead the organization into the future. So if you would share your background a little bit.
Yeah, well, I will try. I mean, that could be the whole podcast, so I'll try and condense it as best I can. I think, one of the things that I like people to know is I have really been involved with the arts my entire life. Starting at 6 years old, I started music when I was 6. And the first kind of part of my life really was devoted to music and the performing arts. That was my first love, and that's what I originally went to university to study. So I was very involved in classical music, voice, dance, but also straight theater, all the way through. I know. It's very true. So that took me up through university. And then really, I think because I had started so young, and it was it is a very intense life, particularly when you're in the classical arts for a very young person, that I just kind of burned out and realized that maybe I had a great, wise actress once tell me, the morning you wake up and you can think of doing anything else, go do it, because you don't have the kind of obsessive drive that it is going to take to make it in the performing arts or any of the arts, really. And so I found that I had that day. And then, again, really trying to keep this short, I had been very fortunate to take art history as an undergraduate in a summer program in Florence, Italy. And so that was my first real art history class.
Talk about a place to be in.
I mean, it was, I still pinch myself when I think about it. And so when I was casting about for things to do, my father was really pushing dermatology, and that just didn't seem like that was my calling. He pushed that for a really long time. But it kind of came back to that experience of studying art history, and it was, before I took that class, I think so many people thought art history was learning names and dates and being able to recite them and know every painting, since we're talking Renaissance art history there, every painting that Michelangelo did from the first to the last and it's not that at all. It's kind of, new art history. The art history that we practice today is really almost a kind of visual cultural anthropology. You learn so much about the society in which the art was created, and that really opened up a whole new avenue of investigation for me. So I fell in love with art history, ended up doing a second bachelor's degree in art history. Part of that time was spent studying overseas again, this time in London. I totally fell in love with London. I believe in reincarnation because of London. I set foot on Great Russell Street for the first afternoon I was there and knew I had been there, countless times before. And I just have never felt as at home anywhere. So decided that I never wanted to leave London, and that led me to going to graduate school over there. I had my first museum jobs with the Tate over there, and that's really what got me into museum work over teaching, although I do teach a lot and I love teaching. So that's how I got into museums. Then I ended up back in America, never thinking I would live in America again, certainly never thinking I would live in my home state of Florida again. I ended up having 2 jobs in Florida.
Funny how that
yes, don't, that kind of proverb, how do you make the gods laugh, tell them your plans. So
Yeah, exactly.
I learned that pretty early on in this experience. After being a curator for a number of years and really shaping programmatic vision, I became interested in shaping institutional vision. And so that took me to the next step of becoming a museum director. I was first director at the Fralin Museum of Art at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. One of the early lessons about UVA is that they are everywhere, so I'm sure someone watching this right now will be a UVA alum. So I loved my time in Charlottesville, loved UVA, was there for 6 years, had absolutely no plans to move. I had a really, really great life there. But one day I got a call from a recruiter about the McNay position that was opening up. And I probably shouldn't admit this, but at first I was like, I almost say audition, I still almost say audition. I haven't interviewed in a really long time. Maybe I should just take the call to make sure my interview chops are up. Right, so that's initially why I took the call, having no desire to leave Charlottesville or to be on the job market again. But that first call really, I was very intrigued after that first call. I, of course, knew the McNay. I had been once before to a conference that was in San Antonio. I knew the McNay as well because in graduate school, I studied early 20th century European art. I studied with one of the great Picasso scholars of the world, so I'm very steeped in Picasso, even though that's not what I actually did my research on. So I knew the McNay through its collection. Our Picasso collage is in every single book on Picasso and collage ever written, almost, possibly ever written. So if you're an art historian, you know the McNay because you see it in that caption in every book on Picasso and collage. So, it became more and more intriguing as the process went on. And then one thing that I realized that kind of cemented it for me was because of my background, starting off in the performing arts and classical music, that's the Tobin collection of theater arts here, which I did not know was a part of the McNay until I started in that process. And then the second part of my life in graduate school was all late 19th, early 20th century European art. And that's, of course, the core of Marian Koogler McNay's collection, the core of the McNay's founding collection. And then my whole working life has been with living artists and contemporary art. And that's, of course, what Marian McNay was collecting in her day was contemporary art and living artists. And that has been the history forward since our founding and opening in 1954 of collecting the art of our time, collecting contemporary artists. So for the first time, I really felt like I had found a museum, particularly because of the Tobin collection, that had all three of my lives under one roof and all three of my absolute loves. So then I became like determined to get the job. And if I didn't get it, it was gonna be like really, really awful. So I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad.
We're very glad.
It's such a privilege and an honor to be here and kind of playing a small role in continuing Marian Koogler McNay's legacy, which is profound in San Antonio. It's been one of the great joys of coming to this position. I'm only the fourth director in the history of the McNay, which is very rare these days. And it speaks to how important I think that legacy that she started really has been and how kind of infectious this place is.
That's such a wonderful story. You know, one of the things we like to talk about or that interests us a lot at Voice of San Antonio is this concept of pioneers and how founders like Marian Koogler McNay, of city organizations or institutions and cultural institutions in particular, they were such visionaries. And so much of what's going on in San Antonio is still being pioneered. And so for those of us in town who are attracted to San Antonio, have that spirit in them. And I think it's so interesting that you were able to connect with her legacy in her spirit in that way, because she founded something that was so unique
Truly.
In her time and something that never fit inside of a box, right? And so you don't fit inside of one box. I certainly don't fit inside of one box. And so much of what we're doing and still creating in San Antonio, I think, is led by a lot of people who don't fit traditional molds and end up here because they identify that opportunity. And so I'm really curious to hear about how you use that and apply that sort of spirit in your leadership with things that are happening at the McNay currently in this climate.
Gosh, that's such a great question. I love how you framed her as a pioneer and the pioneering spirit of San Antonio. That's something, I hadn't quite thought of it in those terms, but you're absolutely right. One of the things, I will get to answer your question eventually, but what it's made me think of is one of the things I really fell in love, my partner and I both fell in love with San Antonio very quickly, is because it's one of those American cities that is not trying to be anything other than San Antonio. And there are a few of those around, I think. I think of Baltimore, another city that I love that is defiantly Baltimore. It's not interested in being Philadelphia. It's definitely not interested in being New York. It is Baltimore. And I feel San Antonio has a similar flavor to it. What really struck us when we were first coming to San Antonio and getting to know it, that really, and I'm probably going to use this term too many times, infectious. It just kind of, we were really taken aback by it, is this feeling that, much to I think what you said, everyone in San Antonio is convinced that San Antonio is the greatest city in America. And they don't shy away from its problems. People are very honest about that. It's come up in all of every conversation I've had about, the poverty rate, and how San Antonio is going to grow into the future in an intentional way. All of that comes up, but at their core, I feel San Antonians truly believe this is the best city in America, and they just want to make sure that that's your experience as well. And I don't think I've ever lived in a place, I moved a lot, I don't think I've ever lived in a place that I could quite say that about. And it really marked San Antonio as very special to us early on. So I think, to get back to your question, there's a little bit of that in how I'm thinking about the McNay, the conversations that we have in the McNay. We've recently been talking through this concept of local roots, global impact. And I think that speaks a lot to what Marian Koogler McNay was doing, but also to what the whole 70-plus year history of the McNay now has been, and maybe we have a different way of phrasing it. but that's something that's really starting to permeate our conversations here. Something I talk a lot about. I've done a lot of teaching. I love teaching. I talk to a lot of college students and emerging professionals and young curators. And one thing that someone who has mostly worked in regional museums, think is very important is when I was the curator at the John and Mabel Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida, I was very aware that I was curating for my audience in Sarasota and the people that would be coming to that fantastic museum. I was not curating for the audience of MoMA in New York. I was also not curating for other curators. I was curating for the people that were our visitors, our members, our community in Sarasota or in Orlando or in Charlottesville. And I think that's something that my colleagues here at the McNay do an exceptional job with. They know that they are curating at the McNay in San Antonio, and a lot of thought and conversation goes into what does that mean as we're presenting. We might be bringing artists in from far afield, which we do, and I think that's a great service that museums provide to their communities. We're able to bring in those kind of, if you think of artists as outside resources, we're able to bring in those outside resources and perspectives to our community. But we also have a long tradition of working with local artists and increasingly working with local and regional and Texas contemporary artists. And that's where I think some of the most interesting work can really happen, is bringing that multiplicity of voices and perspectives into one conversation or multiple conversations under one roof. Does that kind of, I think, get to your question?
Yes, I have two thoughts that came up. One of them is it's really interesting to think about. I'm not sure most people are aware of how a museum like this can influence and help launch a career of a local artist, because you're bringing global voices and global expertise to join them here. Say, one of my friends, Kelly O'Connor, I remember her mural was on the front. So what happens when, you're a local artist and you're seen and you're part of the conversation now?
Right, and I think you're exactly right. I think a lot about our platform and the resources we have with that platform, and how can we, marshal those resources to help, in this case, usually artists who don't necessarily have that platform or those resources yet. And in my own curatorial practice, I really early on kind of started to focus on emerging artists and mid-career artists, because both, for various reasons, have a hard time getting platformed within the wider art world, art community. So I thought, as a curator, I have a great deal of agency and resources, depending, at whatever museum I'm working at. And it's incumbent upon me to use those resources for the benefit, again, because I'm working with contemporary artists, with living artists, for those living artists. So I think, yes, when we bring a local or a regional artist in, along with showing an artist that might already be more famous on the world stage or the international stage, I do think that provides a kind of, level up or stepping stone for that artist that might not have had the opportunities for wider exposure. And that can come through just the visitation of our audience. That can come through media. We've been getting some really great national media in the last 2 years here at the McNay. And so having, all of those names mentioned together, I think, I hope is helpful and very important. I always have to be self-critical and think about what am I missing as a director? What am I missing as a curator? Where are my blind spots? I was trained as a very, very traditional art historian and very traditional, for most parts, museum professional. And so not that long ago, I think a lot of museums really shied away from showing local or regional talent. along with artists or alongside artists that might have a global platform. That was wrong. And I think we are a lot smarter and more conscientious about that as an industry these days. That's something I had to learn. I didn't start off there. And so again, in coming to a place like the McNay that's now in its 71st year, looking back at our kind of founding DNA, Marian Koogler was collecting, now it's the who's who of modernism, but it wasn't necessarily at the time she was collecting. She was also collecting frequently less typical works by artists that were more well-known, which I think is really interesting to think about. So it's kind of like if you go all the way back to her and then start to look at, the opening exhibition at the McNay was an exhibition of Picasso. And today, of course, Picasso is Picasso. Right. And that wouldn't seem odd. And Picassos are among the biggest blockbuster exhibitions in the international art world. In the 1950s, to do a Picasso show in San Antonio, Texas, was very vanguard. And a lot of people that were coming through wouldn't have really even known who Picasso was in America at that time. And so we've been doing a lot of conversations around that type of history at the McNay and how really we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to lean into our history and our DNA because it's all there, and we just need to keep doing that work and thinking about, what that work looked like for Marian Koogler in the 40s and 50s is certainly different than what it looks like necessarily in 2025. So it's not like we can just, wash, rinse, and repeat. Right. But certainly the kind of impetus for community and for the support of artists and bringing artists into the community has been there from the beginning.
There's a little bit of rebellion in her, or a lot of rebellion in her.
There's a lot of rebellion in her, I think.
And courage. And I love that. I love thinking about that and how can we continue, especially, as cultural institutions, right, that are moving our world forward, How can we apply a little bit of that punk rock mentality to what we're doing in any field, but I think especially here, particularly in a museum where there's such safe spaces traditionally for community members, whether they're artists or not, and looking at a lot of the division in our world today. How can we use our platforms? How can we use our resources to create those spaces where people feel safe to come forward and be their, most comfortable self?
Absolutely. I think it's something I've thought a lot about throughout my career, and it is never, not of the moment, it seems. So, a few things that I think make museums really special in that way. One, to your point, I do think people feel very safe in museum. All people feel very safe in museum spaces. There have been a number of surveys done, very scientific, very large surveys done by the American Alliance of Museums, which is our kind of governing our accrediting body, an advocacy body. And overwhelmingly, the American people rank museums as one of the most trusted institutions in our country. They rank just below friends and family as trusted sources. Museums rank far above news organizations, far above other not-for-profit type organizations, and far above government and politics. So when you talk to the American people, we know that we play a really important role in individual lives and in our communities as a trusted space. And when they are asked in these surveys, why do you trust museums? Overwhelmingly they say because they feel that museums provide factual information that they can trust, that the people who work in museums care about what they're presenting and want to get it right. And I think that's very true. It doesn't mean we always get it right, but we're always trying to get it right. And they're also, the American people are very sophisticated. They know it's not always neutral. Museums are not neutral spaces. The information may not always be neutral, but they do feel that it is overwhelmingly rooted in fact. So when they walk through the door, if there's someone that is, comfortable walking through the door of a museum, they are probably coming with some level of that foundational expectation and feeling about it. And the other interesting thing, it doesn't matter what kind of museum, we're all statistically tied. So they feel that about art museums, they feel that about botanical gardens, they feel that about zoos and aquariums, natural history museums, children's museums. We are overwhelmingly trusted places, and I think that provides a sense of safety. I think the other thing, and this more specifically about art museums, that sets us apart, particularly in our culture today, is we have objects. And it's far easier to have a difficult conversation when it is mediated around an object, whether it's a historic object or a contemporary object. I think it allows, it gives permission to perhaps drop your guard a bit, to focus not on the person that you're having the conversation with, but the conversation around the object and the history of the object and what the artist or the object is saying to us. And I think museums do a particularly good job, and again, particularly art museums do a particularly good job in understanding that and kind of marshaling that resource to have conversations, whether they're easy or difficult. Rarely do we have any conversation in a contemporary culture that isn't kind of all over that spectrum.
Right.
It's impossible now. We unfortunately live, I think, in what feels like and what we are told, because it sells ads, that we live in a divisive culture. We live in a state of division. I think we live in much less state of division than social media would like us to believe, and there's all kinds of, I think, studies around that. And so museums, being one of the most trusted institutions in American society, I think we have the real opportunity to prove that we are actually a much less divided society than we are led to believe. And I think any of us that work in museums, not just the McNay, any museum, I think we get to see that happen pretty frequently, and that's kind of what keeps us going and gives us hope.
And yeah, going from divisive to uniting, I think just believing in the ability to unite, as an organization, and sort of a duty and responsibility to do that for the community.
Absolutely.
And another thing that I want to touch on, because we're talking a lot about museums and traditional museums, and I think a lot of people also might feel sort of intimidated to come to a museum. And I think that's something that you all do so beautifully, is you welcome the community so often with so many different types of events onto the grounds, into the museum, tequila tasting events, right, which we have attended, dance all night in the auditorium, these types of, this different type of programming that reaches all these different age groups. I mean, my almost 3-year-old son just the other day was talking about, I want to go to the museum. He wants to come here and be on the bouncy bungee run that you all had at your family day.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect.
It's great, but I think also talking about the McNay as a uniting place for the community, whether you're into art or you're not, or you're introduced to art here for the first time, it's such a welcoming venue for anything that anybody could think of hosting here, and you all do such a beautiful job of opening your doors to everybody.
Thank you. Again, that's something that we think a lot about. Our vision statement starts off that the McNay will be San Antonio's place of belonging. And that word belonging, again, back to your original question, how did I end up here? The fact that the word belonging was used in that way really, for me, set the McNay apart, because that's such an intentional word. Frequently we say we want everyone to feel welcome. And welcome is important, it's a first step, but I think it can kind of end a little abruptly or superficially. Belonging, and how we think about belonging, particularly the McNay, yes, you're welcome. You're greeted, hopefully with a smile when you come in. We want you to know that we're happy that you're here, but then we also want you to see yourself reflected in our galleries. I think that's, visibility, no matter what your background or your lived experience is very important. So we try and think about having as many types of visibility as possible in what we collect and what we're showing, the types of artists that we're working with. And I think belonging also means that you know that you are heard when you are here, and that you are valued when you're here. And there are little ways to show all of that. And again, it's not something that's ever done. We always have to be working at it. It will change over time, what that looks like, what that feels like. We will fail at times and learn from those mistakes. But when one of your core values, when your core vision is that we'll be San Antonio's place of belonging, I think that's a really great place to start. And what you mentioned about the importance of having all of these different types of programming that now I think we take for granted at museums, but again, in the not too distant past, would have been very rare. But all of that is, to your point exactly, there can be a lot of anxiety coming to a museum, any type of cultural institution, but museums in particular, because especially you're coming up to Marian Koogler grand home. Who lives in a house like this? Not the majority, not me, not the majority of our visitors.
They're very reverent spaces.
Yes, and they're very reverent spaces. If it's not Marian Koogler's house, it's, a kind of temple-like facade. You have to walk up however many steps to the Philadelphia Museum, or run if you're Rocky, right? Or the Met, all of that. It can be very intimidating. If you haven't been before, or you didn't grow up going to museums, or you're not sure what the rules are, or if you're going to see people that look like you. So all of those different types of activities are really to help get over one of my favorite terms, which is threshold anxiety. And I think that so many people, I have threshold anxiety. There is a museum that shall remain nameless, that, I've been doing this for 25 years. I have a PhD in art history. There is one museum that I go to that I feel uncomfortable in and intimidated by, and like, should I be here? And I don't spend a lot of time in that one museum unless I'm going for a very specific purpose, because it is, for all of those, I'm not sure that I'm wanted there or that I belong there. And so if that can happen to me, director of a museum, art historian, that can happen to so many people. And so we're constantly trying to think of ways, and again, it's a process, it will never be completed, but we're constantly trying to think of ways to remove some of that threshold anxiety. And then once we get you in, we hope that the experience is going to be so positive that you are going to feel like you belong and that you'll be back.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this home in particular, it's so interesting that the museum was originally a home, because that Texan hospitality, and particularly San Antonian hospitality.
Yes, I agree. Agree.
Because it is unique.
Yeah,
and it
I
is
was
authentic.
just in Fort Worth, and they're very nice, but it's not San Antonio.
It's not San Antonio.
Yep.
And the way we do things in San Antonio with big celebration and cultural events, and it's very appropriate, I feel, and that's one of the reasons why I think I feel so at home here and like I belong, is because that has been the tradition here in a
Absolutely.
very intentional way. And thinking about looking ahead, kind of now as your fall exhibition is about to open, what are some of the really exciting programs and exhibitions that are happening at the McNay?
Oh gosh, there's so many. One just happened, but I want to put a plug in for next year because it's such a great thing. So we just had our first summer camp post-COVID.
Yes, I saw
And it
that.
was just remarkable. It was 2 weeks of not only our own campers, but lots of the other camps come to the McNay because it's 8,000 degrees outside and it's 70 degrees in the McNay.
Yes.
And so you see all of the other campers lining up to come to the McNay. So there was this kind of 2 weeks in July where it was just filled with kids all day. And that's kind of one of those remarkable moments and we did some, there were some of my colleagues shot some videos of the kids around, and like one of my favorite was there was a moment where they took a break and they all came over to the Blackburn patio to pet the koi. And I did not know that Agnes, first of all, I did not know her name was Agnes, the giant koi, really likes like when people come and like touch her nose a little bit. So there's this fantastic reel that was shared internally by one of my colleagues of these kids and just their delight. And having that experience at the McNay, that experience of delight, that experience of discovery is every bit as important as the experiences of delight and discovery they have in the galleries. And then they take that all away with them. And so then the McNay becomes, not the art museum where I have to go and be quiet and I can't touch anything, which you can't touch anything. But it becomes a place that you associate with joy and discovery and fun. There was a big study done, it's called Culture Track, and it came about after 9/11 and all that changed in our field then and has been done periodically since then. And a few years ago, there was this kind of, depending on what side of the fence you're on, aha moment or the world is ending moment. And it surveys people that attend cultural organizations and events in the widest possible sense. And two things that it showed us was that people think of street fairs as cultural events and they think of the McNay as a cultural event. And so if you're thinking of a street fair or a food fair on the same as the same type of experience as the art museum, there's something that we need to take away from that. And then the thing that was really for me, an aha moment was the number one thing people were looking for when they either came to do something at the McNay or went to a food fair or went to the symphony or any of the other expressions of culture was they were looking for an experience of fun. And I don't think fun, certainly not, maybe when I was starting out in museums, but not before me. Fun was probably not a word that you would associate readily with museums, but that is what people are expecting, and they're expecting fun on our grounds during one of our outside events. They're expecting fun in the galleries as well, and so we have to we can't be all things to all people, but we need to be mindful of where we can meet them with their expectations as they come into the museum.
I love that. So exhibitions coming up.
Oh, sorry, exhibitions coming up. Totally got off. We were talking about.
I love
This fall we're opening a wonderful exhibition by the artist Sandy Skoglund, and I'm also really excited about this. One, because I've admired her work for a very long time, and have never had the opportunity to meet her or work with her until the McNay. So I'm thrilled to now know Sandy. We took a selfie today. We're also showing there are 3 large installations, 2 of which are iconic installations in her body of work. One of them is called Radioactive Cats. I am a cat. I'm an avowed crazy cat lady. So the fact that Radioactive Cats, which I have loved so much since I was an undergrad and first learned about it, is now not only, it's in the McNay. I could go look and see it whenever I want. So I'm excited about that. But the other thing that I think is really beautiful about this is we've had a 20-plus year relationship with Sandy at this point. our head of curatorial affairs, Renee Paul Barrio, who is about to retire next week after 20 years at the McNay. He has done a number of projects with Sandy. We have a major piece in the collection. Most people call it the Cheeto piece. It's actually cheese doodles. That's Sandy. So something that I've tried to do at my previous museums that we are already doing at the McNay and I would like to see grow is these kind of long relationships with certain artists. And it's not every artist, but there are artists like Sandy that kind of, you find that you have an affinity with the institution, with the community. And so bringing Sandy back for this kind of major exhibition with 3 just incredible environments and photographs, it being one of Renee's last projects for the McNay, and then celebrating this 20+ year relationship with the artist, I think is very, very special. So I'm excited about that. Then in the spring, we will actually have an exhibition looking at the 20 years of collecting under Renee's leadership, curatorial leadership. Yeah, so really, I'm very excited about that. Our industry has changed a lot. In decades past, it was very common for museum curators to stay at an institution for 20 or 30 years. That is almost unheard of now. And so for Renee to have made that commitment to this institution and to San Antonio, he's had an incredible impact on our permanent collection and evolving the permanent collection. And so I'm really excited to see, to give our audiences an opportunity to see what it looks like when someone has been caring for a collection for 20 years and adding to that collection. So that'll be the big spring exhibition. We do around, those are the 2 what we call banner exhibitions, the really big ones in the Sterren Center. But we do 13 to 14 or more exhibitions throughout the year. We have an amazing installation up right now of Jody Falwell's pottery, just an incredibly important artist, Native American artist in her pottery tradition and pushing that tradition forward. And it's a real honor to be able to show that work at the museum and to bring that to San Antonio and to bring Jody to San Antonio as part of the programming. So that I'm very excited about. And yeah, it's just, there's always, so one thing, if the listeners, watchers, I don't know what we say for podcasts, if they take only one thing away, what I would hope they would take away is, I think a lot of times people think museums are static spaces, and they are among the least static spaces in your community now. Again, that's very different. That's how museums are today. So you can come to the McNay once a month, you can come once a week. You're probably gonna see something different, a whole new installation going out. We've got some great installations of the Tobin collection coming up. One of them, the spring installation, will be a lot of new work that we just acquired by a very important theater designer, Tony Walton. So I'm very excited to show that, share those new pieces with the community, those new works with the community. So yeah, there's just, I mean, again, that would be a whole entire podcast on its own of what is coming up in the next year. But yeah, again, museums are not static. The McNay, chief among them, so.
I love that. You mentioned the word impact, and it made me think of how can, even if people in the San Antonio community, even if it's not their thing to come to the museum, how can San Antonians who care about our culture, who care about our city, who care about our creative economy, how can they help the McNay make that impact and support in various ways?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge not everyone is going to be a museum nerd. Right. Just like I'm not going to go to your baseball game, I have no interest. I'm sure baseball is lovely, but it's not for me. Museums aren't for everyone, and that's fine too, and we have to be honest about that. But if museums are for you, if the McNay is for you, it is important to support us. I think all art museums are perceived as being, very well resourced. And they aren't, to be perfectly honest. I mean, the McNay is very stable financially, but we are constantly raising money to meet our mission and to provide these experiences for our community, particularly when we know that entrance fees are the primary barrier, and particularly in San Antonio, the ways raising more money so that we can do more free programming is always important to us. So I think two things. This is going to sound very kind of 1990s infomercial, but charity info. But no gift is a small gift. So anything that you donate or contribute to the McNay is magnified by the work that my colleagues do. And I think, one of the most important ways that people have historically done that, and we hope that they continue to do, is be a member of the museum. You get wonderful perks when you become a member of the museum, but more importantly, you are ensuring the future of the programming that you enjoy and making it, and this is so important, making it more accessible to people that might not have the means, or it might be a real struggle for them to come to the McNay or come to programming. So being a member is one of the absolute best things that you can do, and we are so appreciative of all of our members at every level. The other thing that I think is really important is bring a friend. This is true of the McNay, it's true of almost every community museum. I could go out on the street right now in downtown San Antonio and ask people if they know about the McNay, and I will find people that don't know, that are San Antonians, that have lived here their whole life, that maybe have heard of it, or they might not have heard of it, or they haven't been. So if you find those people, if they are your neighbors, if they are in your friend group, and you think that they might like baseball and the museum, bring them to the McNay, introduce them to the McNay. You're never too old to be introduced to this great museum.
Do you hear that, San Antonio? Bring a friend
where
to the McNay.
we're looking at this, San Antonio, bring a friend to the McNay, yes.
Bring a friend to the McNay and support not only the McNay, but our other wonderful arts institutions.
Absolutely.
Because it is very important. Lastly, to wrap this up, to bring it all back to San Antonio, right. I would love to know, as somebody who's a new San Antonian, what do you love about living in San Antonio, and how have you been able to build a global life here?
Yeah, oh gosh, again, each of your questions, Ellie, is an entire podcast. I could just go. So a couple of things. Both my partner and I are from the Deep South, and the South is renowned for being nice and polite, and frequently that's where it stops. I can say that as someone from the Deep South. As a Southerner, I can say that tends to be very superficial. What we have been struck by in San Antonio, what we constantly, 2.5 years in, we still talk about it all the time, is that San Antonio is the most authentically kind place either of us has ever lived. It is breathtaking how deeply, authentically kind people are here. And we still, as I said, 2.5 years in, we still aren't over it. It's one of the reasons that we fell instantly in love with this city. Building a global life, easy because being affiliated with this amazing museum, we're bringing people in all the time from all over the country, all over the globe. So that's very fortunate. My partner is based in Manhattan, so we go back and forth. As I say, I'm a part-time New Yorker, so it's maybe a little easier in that way. But I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, that must be so tough. But we view it as like we have the best of both worlds. It really is, and it's so easy. Everyone I know complains about the airport. I'm gonna look at the camera again. As someone who has lived all over the world, in many, many different sizes of places. The San Antonio airport is a dream. I love it, and it's only getting better. It's only getting better.
And did you know, fun art fact, they are, the new terminal, Terminal 3,
Yes.
is going to be completely filled with only San Antonio artists.
I love that.
Yes.
As it should be.
As it should
I
be.
love that.
And our friend Crystal, the director of the Arts and Culture Department, has been working very hard to make that happen. So yeah, it'll be very artistic Terminal 3.
It is easy to be a global citizen in San Antonio. One, because so many people, and that's another thing, that I didn't know about San Antonio until we moved here. All of the colleges and universities, they're bringing in amazing people. All of our cultural partners and colleagues across the city are bringing in amazing people. You just have to, if someone says they're bored in San Antonio or there's not enough going on, you have to be working really hard at being bored in San Antonio.
I love that you said that. I think people do get very comfortable in their blinder lane.
And look, I get it. As a part-time New Yorker, our favorite pastime is complaining about New York City. I get it. I understand. But I hope, and I do think, I think the vast majority of people in San Antonio think that they live in the greatest city in America, and they just want you to understand that and have that experience too. And that is one of the things that makes us so happy to be a part of the city.
Love that. Well, we are thrilled that you're here and that you chose San Antonio.
Absolutely.
And especially when you could live anywhere.
San Antonio chose me as well, but yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me today and for having Voice of San Antonio inside of the McNay.
I know.
And we look forward to many more conversations and collaborations to come.
Likewise, we are always happy to host you at the McNay. I always feel like Marian's, listening.
Her spirit is here.
She's around. She's around. So great. Thank you,
Thank you,
Ellie.
Matthew.
Thanks.